Welcome to Starbound's Fantasy channel. My name is Carol, and I'll be your narrator for today. Before we get started with the story, go ahead, check and make sure that you're subscribed. It's 100% free, and it allows our stories to pop up in your feed more often. With that, let's get started. Talons ripped through clouds as Eris soared above the human settlement of Eldrath. Her wings, the color of bruised obsidian, caught the dying embers of sunset. Each wingbeat carried the same weight of vengeance. Just days prior, she had returned to her nesting grounds to find her mate, Varanus, dead. His magnificent copper scales harvested by human blades. Their 7 unhatched eggs smashed, the 8th egg stolen. A prophecy had circulated among the human kingdoms. A clutch of 8s will birth an empire of scale and flame. The 8th egg carries the doom of mankind. So, they had come with their iron and their fear, and they had taken everything. Eris tucked her wings and dove. The first gout of dragonfire dissolved the village's eastern wall. Screams erupted as villagers scattered. Guards ran forward with spears and swords, their courage admirable and useless. Eris's second breath ignited the central square, the flames sweeping outward with unnatural hunger. In the doorway of a small dwelling stood a young woman. She clutched a blanket-wrapped bundle to her chest, her body poised in the universal stance of motherhood, defiant, sacrificial, absolute. Her eyes found Eris's, and in them was not hatred, not even fear, only the fierce determination to shield her child. "Please," she whispered. Eris hesitated. Something about the girl reminded her of herself, centuries ago. But the memory of Varanus' torn body overwhelmed her. With a snarl that splintered the air, Eris unleashed her fire. The young mother turned at the last moment, curling her body around her child. Even as she fell, she kept it pressed to her, away from the flames. The fire subsided. Beneath the woman's charred body lay the blanket-wrapped bundle, miraculously untouched. A tiny face stared up at Eris, red from screaming, eyes wide and dark. Reality crashed upon her. She had killed a mother. She had orphaned a child. She had become what she most despised, a destroyer of beginnings. She could kill it now. One swift movement would end its life, and perhaps that would be a mercy. But as she stared into those dark eyes, Eris made a different choice. With unexpected gentleness, she gathered the blanket in her claws and took to the sky, leaving behind the smoldering remains of Eldrath. In the old tongue, in the language of dragons, she named him Nerith, Echo of Flame. The cave Eris chose lay high in the Stormbreak Mountains. Here, she created a home for herself and the human child she had claimed. Nerith grew quickly. By his 7th summer, he could navigate the entire cave system blindfolded. Eris taught him to survive, how to hunt, how to identify plants that would nourish and plants that would kill. She taught him draconic philosophy, the concept of Sorthim, the balance between action and contemplation, the principle of Verlath, the responsibility of the powerful to maintain harmony rather than dominance. She did not teach him about his origins. When he asked, she told him he was dragon-born of fire and grief. It was not entirely a lie. On his 10th birthday, Eris began teaching him fragments of the Old Tongue. The language of dragons was not meant for human vocal cords, but Nerith proved an apt pupil. "Tharis," she instructed, the word emerging as a low, musical rumble. "Tharis," he repeated, straining to capture the harmonics. "Good. It means to perceive beyond sight." "Like when you sense a deer in the valley before we see them?" "Yes." Her tail swished against the cave floor. "Languages shape thought, Nerith. The Old Tongue allows us to express certain concepts that, human language cannot contain. But how do you know what human language can express? We've never met any. Eris fell silent, her golden eyes narrowing. She had been careless with her words. I have observed them, she said finally. From afar. Can we observe them together? I want to see what they're like. No. The word emerged sharper than she intended. Humans are nothing but ashwalkers. They forget. They betray. They kill what they fear. Later that evening, as Nerith slept, Eris watched him. In these moments, she could almost forget what he was. Almost. But then, there were times when she caught sight of him standing against the dawn, his shape so alien to her, this creature with no wings, no scales, no natural weapons. In those moments, grief would surge through her anew, and she would remember why she had taken him. Not as a son, never that, but as a living reminder of what she had done, and what had been done to her. Sometimes on those mornings she wept, and sometimes Nerith would approach cautiously, placing his small hand on her scaled foreleg, offering comfort he couldn't possibly understand he needed to give. The eastern path down the mountain was treacherous, all loose and sudden drops. Nerith navigated it with the confidence of one who had spent his life on precipices, though never this particular one. Eris had forbidden him from traveling this route, and, until now, he had obeyed without question. But the questions that had once been whispers had grown to shouts within his mind. Who was he? What was his place in a world where he resembled neither his guardian nor any creature of the wild? And why did Eris sometimes look at him with such profound sorrow? The sun had just cleared the horizon when he reached a natural outcropping that formed a perfect observation point. Below, a narrow road wound through the foothills, connecting distant settlements too small to see clearly. Nerith settled into a crevice, making himself as inconspicuous as possible, and waited. By mid-morning, his patience was rewarded. A small caravan appeared in the distance, 3 wagons pulled by sturdy horses, accompanied by a handful of mounted guards and several people on foot. Humans, just like the ones Eris had described with such disdain. Except they didn't appear particularly fearsome from this distance. They looked small and vulnerable against the vastness of the landscape. As they drew closer, he could hear snatches of their conversation carried on the wind. Complaints about the road, laughter at some shared joke, a child's question about how much further they had to travel. Their language was unfamiliar, yet somehow he understood parts of it, as if awakening to a tongue he had known in some half-forgotten dream. He leaned forward, straining to hear more. A fragment of song drifted upward as one of the travelers began to sing. The melody was unlike anything Eris had ever taught him. Not the deep, resonant harmonics of draconic music, but something lighter, quicker, filled with a yearning that matched his own. Without thinking, Nerith began to hum along, his voice finding the contours of the tune. For hours, he watched as the caravan made its slow progress along the road. He observed the way they moved, the way they spoke to each other, the casual touches they exchanged. There was a connectedness to their interactions that made his chest ache with a longing he couldn't name. By the time they had passed beyond his view, the sun was beginning its westward descent. Nerith reluctantly began his climb back to the cave, his mind whirling with new impressions. He returned the next day, and the next. Each time, he ventured a little further down the mountain, drawing closer to the road. He began to collect words, phrases, gestures. He mimicked their speech patterns when alone, testing the feel of their language on his tongue. He practiced their ways of walking, of using their hands to emphasize points, of tilting their heads in question or agreement. One day, as he prepared to descend again, he found Eris waiting at the cave entrance. Her posture was rigid, her eyes cold as winter moons. "Where have you been going?" she demanded. Nerith hesitated. He had never directly lied to her, but he had never defied her so openly either, by sneaking toward the eastern road. "I've been watching the road below," he admitted. "The eastern road?" Her voice held a dangerous stillness. "Where the humans travel?" "Yes." He squared his shoulders, suddenly aware of how small he was compared to her towering form. "I wanted to see them for myself." "After I expressly forbade it?" "You never explained why I shouldn't see them. You only said they were dangerous." "And that wasn't enough?" Flame flickered at the corners of her mouth, a sign of her agitation. "Did I not raise you to trust my judgment?" "You raised me to think for myself," Nerith countered. "To observe, to question, to seek understanding." "Not about this." Her tail lashed against the stone floor, sending small rock fragments skittering into darkness. "Never about this." "Why?" He stepped closer, emboldened by the frustration of years. "What are you so afraid I'll discover?" "Afraid?" The word emerged as a hiss of steam. "I fear nothing from those creatures. It is you I seek to protect." "From what? They didn't even see me. I was careful." "And what happens when they do see you? When they notice a strange youth who speaks their language with an accent they cannot place, who moves differently, thinks differently, question things they take for granted?" Her voice rose, echoing against the cave walls. "They will not welcome you, Nerith. They will fear you, and humans destroy what they fear." "Like dragons hide from what they fear?" The words escaped before he could reconsider them. Eris went utterly still. The golden flame of her eyes seemed to dim, as though shutters had closed behind them. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, controlled. "You know nothing of what you speak." "Then teach me!" He took another step toward her, hands spread in supplication. "Tell me about them! Tell me why you hate them so much! Tell me why I feel drawn to their music, their language, their way of being!" For a moment, something flickered across her features, an emotion he couldn't identify. She seemed about to speak, to reveal something significant. Then the moment passed, and her expression hardened once more. "They are nothing but ashwalkers," she said, the familiar phrase emerging with new bitterness. "They forget their own history. They betray their own principles. They kill what they cannot understand." "But enough!" She turned away, her massive form blocking the cave entrance. "I will hear no more of this. You will remain on the mountain, away from the eastern slopes." With that, she pushed past him and disappeared into the deeper chambers of the cave, leaving him alone with questions that only seemed to multiply. That night, Nerith dreamed of fire. Not the controlled, purposeful flame of Eris's breath, when she lit their evening fires or heated the cold stones of the cave in winter. This was wild fire, consuming fire, fire that devoured everything in its path with indiscriminate hunger. In the dream, he stood in the midst of it, unburned but not unaffected. He could feel the heat on his skin, taste the ash on his tongue, hear screams that seemed to come from the flames themselves. And behind it all, a rhythmic sound, like the beating of massive wings. He woke gasping, his body slick with sweat despite the cool mountain air. The dream clung to him, its images refusing to fade with consciousness. Nerith rose silently and made his way to the cave entrance. The night was clear, stars scattered across the black vault of sky like embers. He sat on the smooth stone ledge that served as their threshold, drawing his knees up to his chest and wrapping his arms around them. The dream felt like memory, though he knew it couldn't be. He had no memories before Eris. His life began in this cave, with her massive form curled protectively around his small one, with her voice teaching him the names of things, the ways of the mountain, the principles of draconic thought. Yet, sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, he caught glimpses of something else, a different kind of warmth, a softer voice, a face he could never quite bring into focus bending over him with an expression he somehow knew was love. "You should be sleeping." Eris's voice startled him. He hadn't heard her approach, which was unusual. She rarely moved stealthily around him. "I had a dream," he said simply. She settled beside him, her scales gleaming dully in the starlight. "What manner of dream?" "Fire." He kept his gaze on the distant horizon. "Everywhere. Fire. I was in the middle of it, but it didn't burn me." Eris was silent for so long that he finally turned to look at her. Her expression was unreadable, her golden eyes reflecting starlight but revealing nothing of her thoughts. "It was just a dream," she said at last. "Was it?" The question surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. It felt like something more." Her tail curled around her body, a defensive posture he recognized from the few times they had encountered other predators in their territory. "Dreams are the mind's way of processing the day's experiences," she said, her tone deliberately casual. "You've been thinking about humans, about their world. Your mind created images to match those thoughts. But I've never seen a fire like that, not even when you're at your most powerful." "You have imagination, Nerith. It serves you well in many ways, but it can also create fears where none should exist." She shifted slightly, her scales rasping against the stone. "Come back inside. The night grows cold." In a moment." He wasn't ready to return to sleep, to risk falling back into that dream of flame and terror. Eris hesitated, then did something she rarely did. She extended one wing, creating a sheltered space beside her body, an invitation. Nerith moved into the offered sanctuary, feeling the heat that radiated from her scales. When he was younger, this had been his favorite place, nestled against her side, protected from all harm by her massive strength. As he grew older, these moments of physical closeness had become increasingly rare. "Why do you hate them so much?" he asked quietly, the question emerging from some deep place within him. "Hate is too simple a word," she replied, after a long pause. "I fear them. I pity them. I rage against them, and sometimes I envy them." "Envy? You?" The concept seemed absurd. Eris was power incarnate, wisdom embodied. What could she possibly envy from creatures she dismissed as ashwalkers? "Their brief lives burn so brightly," she said, her voice distant, as if speaking to herself rather than to him. "They create with such urgency, love with such desperation, dream with such vivid hope. They must, knowing how little time they have." "And dragons don't?" "We have centuries, Nerith. Sometimes millennia. We watch forests grow from seedlings to ancient giants, then return to soil again. We see mountains wear down to hills. Our perspective is different." "Is that why you've never taken me to meet others of your kind? Because our perspectives are too different?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her wing twitched slightly where it curved above him. "There are few of my kind left," she said finally. And those who remain are scattered, solitary. It is not our way to gather in large numbers except for certain occasions. What occasions? Mating, the passing of significant knowledge, the rare conclaves called to address threats to dragonkind. Her voice took on an edge at the last words. Threats from humans? Yes. The single syllable held volumes of unspoken history. What did they do, Eris? What could humans possibly do to threaten beings like you? She was silent for so long that he thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice was low, vibrating with an emotion he had rarely heard from her. Grief. They did what cleverness always does when confronted with power it fears but cannot match. It finds the vulnerable points, the unguarded moments, the soft underbelly. Her tail curled tighter around her body. Dragons are not invulnerable. We can be killed. And more importantly, our young can be killed. Our eggs can be destroyed before they even have a chance to hatch. Something in her tone, and the specific words she chose, sent a chill through him despite the warmth of her body beside his. Did that happen to you? He asked gently. Did humans kill your children? Her entire body went rigid. Then, with careful control, she folded her wing back against her side, withdrawing the shelter she had offered. It's late, she said, her voice once again the measured tone of teacher to student. And you have lessons tomorrow. Sleep, Nerith, and remember what I've told you about the eastern slopes. She rose with fluid grace and returned to the cave, leaving him alone under the cold light of the stars. Days later, during one of Eris's hunting expeditions, Nerith ventured into the northwest section of the cave system, an area he seldom explored. The chambers there were smaller, the passageways narrower, better suited to his form than to Eris's draconic bulk. He had always assumed she avoided them for that reason. But as he navigated the twisting corridors, he realized there was purpose to their design. They had been carved, not formed naturally, the tool marks still visible in places, despite the erosion of centuries. This had been a deliberate excavation, a creation. At the end of the narrowest passage, he discovered a small, perfectly circular chamber. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating a stone pedestal at the center. On it lay what appeared to be a flat, rectangular object, covered in a thin layer of dust. Nerith approached cautiously. Something about the chamber felt sacred, untouched for ages. He brushed the dust away from the object, revealing a tablet of polished obsidian. Intricate symbols had been carved into its surface, inlaid with what appeared to be copper and silver. It was writing, not in any human script he had glimpsed from afar, but in the fluid, complex symbols of the old tongue. Nerith traced the markings with his fingertips. Eris had taught him only spoken fragments of the language, claiming that its written form was too complex for him to master. Yet, as his fingers moved across the symbols, he found he could decipher parts of it, as if the knowledge had been sleeping within him, waiting to be awakened. Here lies the memory of Varanus, flame of the western sky, voice of thunder. Here lies the memory of our unhatched children, the 7 who never breathed. Here lies the memory of our 8th, the stolen one. May they find their way back to the stars. May your fires burn eternal in the void between worlds. Below these inscriptions were 8 names, rendered in a script so intricate it seemed to move beneath his gaze. As he read them silently, he felt a strange resonance, as if the names themselves held power. each syllable a key, unlocking something within him. The last name, that of the 8th, struck him with particular force. Something about its structure reminded him of his own name, Nerith. There was a pattern there, a relationship he couldn't quite grasp. "What are you doing here?" Eris's voice, low and dangerous, came from the chamber's entrance. Nerith turned to find her filling the doorway, her golden eyes reflecting the moonlight like twin flames. He gestured helplessly at the tablet. "I found this. I can read some of it." She moved into the chamber, her scaled body barely fitting through the entrance. "You should not be here. This place is not for you." "Whose place is it then? Varanus? Your mate?" The pieces were beginning to align in his mind, forming a picture he had never before considered. "These were your children, weren't they? The ones who never hatched, and the 8th, the one who was taken." Eris's head lowered until her gaze was level with his. "How much do you understand of what you read?" "Enough to know you've been keeping secrets from me." His voice trembled slightly, but he held his ground. "Who was Varanus? And what happened to your children? And what does it have to do with why you hate humans so much?" "Some truths are too heavy for the young to bear." "I'm not a child anymore." He placed his hand on the tablet, feeling the coolness of the stone beneath his palm. "I deserve to know who I am, and why you raised me in isolation. Why you never speak of my origins." "Your origins?" Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "Is that what you seek? The truth of where you come from?" "Yes." "Very well." She settled onto her haunches, her tail curling around her massive form. 17 years ago, human kings joined forces to eliminate what they perceived as a threat. A prophecy claimed that a clutch of 8 dragon eggs would birth an empire that would end human dominance. My mate, Varanus, and I produced exactly such a clutch. Nerith felt a chill course through him. "What happened?" "They came in the night. While I was hunting, they killed Varanus. They destroyed 7 of our eggs. The 8th..." Her voice caught momentarily. "The 8th they took. For what purpose, I never discovered." "And then?" Her gaze held his, unflinching. "Then, I descended upon the nearest human settlement and burned it to ash. Every building, every field, every living soul." She paused, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. "Except one." Understanding bloomed within him, terrible and absolute. "Me?" "You were an infant. Your mother died shielding you from my flames." The words landed like physical blows. Nerith staggered back, his hand falling from the tablet. "I'm human?" The question was barely a whisper. Perhaps stupidly, Nerith had suspected he was a dragon placed under some curse that Eris had been trying to break. Or maybe Nerith was some sort of shape-shifting dragon that got stuck in human form. "Yes." The single word held 17 years of unspoken truth. "You killed my mother, my people, and then you took me." Each realization felt like another piece of himself breaking away. "Why? As some kind of trophy?" "No." For the first time, Eris's gaze faltered. "As penance, as reminder, as I don't know what. In that moment, facing a child who had lost everything because of me, just as I had lost everything because of humans. I couldn't leave you to die. So, instead, you lied to me for 17 years? Anger surged through him, hot and unfamiliar. You let me believe I was something I'm not? I never said you were a dragon. Her voice hardened. I said you were dragonborn, of fire and grief. And you were born in fire, born of grief. Mine and your mother's both. Nerith pressed his hands to his temples, trying to contain the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. All this time, when you looked at me with sadness, with anger sometimes, you were seeing her, the woman you killed. Sometimes, the admission seemed to cost her, and sometimes I was seeing something else entirely. What? Possibility. She shifted, scales rasping against stone. The possibility that not all humans are the same, that perhaps one, raised differently, might become something better. Better? He echoed, incredulous. Better than what? My own kind? The kind I never even got to know? Better than the kings who murdered my family. Her voice dropped to a rumble. Better than the soldiers who crushed my children's eggs for a prophecy's sake. Better than those who would destroy what they fear rather than seek to understand it. And what if I'm exactly like them? The question burst from him, carrying all the fear and confusion of his newfound identity. What if I'm just another human who would have killed your kind if given the chance? You're not. Her certainty was absolute. I've watched you grieve for injured animals. I've seen you wonder at beauty that most humans would never notice. I've watched you learn the old tongue with reverence, not as a tool of power, but as a way to understand another mind. Because you taught me that way! You shaped me into what you wanted me to be! I taught you to see the world as it is, not as humans imagine it to be. I taught you to question, to seek understanding before judgment. Those are not draconic traits or human traits. They are the traits of wisdom, regardless of species. Nerith's anger faltered in the face of her calm certainty, but the hurt remained, sharp and insistent. You still should have told me. I had a right to know who I am. Perhaps. She regarded him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between resignation and sorrow. But would you have understood? As a child? Would you have been able to carry the weight of knowing you were raised by the being who destroyed your first family? Would you have been able to see past that knowledge? To learn what I had to teach you? I don't know. The honest answer cost him. But it wasn't your choice to make. It was mine. It became your choice when you were old enough to ask the questions you're asking now. Her tail uncurled slightly, a sign that her defensive posture was easing. And now you have your answers. The question is, what will you do with them? The question hung between them, portentous and daunting. What would he do? Who was he now, knowing what he knew? I need to see them, he said finally. Humans. Not just from a distance. I need to know what being human truly means. They will kill you, Eris warned, her voice flat with certainty. Or they will use you. You speak the old tongue. You know things about dragonkind that humans would torture you to learn. Or they might welcome me. Teach me. Help me understand who I am and where I belong. He met her gaze directly. You don't know, Eris. You've never tried to understand them as they truly are. I understand what they did to my mates. To my children, those are not just actions, Nerith. They are revelations of character. The actions of some reveal the character of those individuals, not an entire species. A distinction humans rarely make when dealing with dragonkind. Her voice had taken on an edge of bitterness again. They see one dragon steal their livestock, and suddenly, all dragons are murderous thieves. Then they're wrong. Nerith moved toward the chamber entrance, determination hardening within him. Just as you're wrong to judge all humans by the actions of those kings and soldiers. Eris didn't move from her position, blocking his path. Where will you go? You have no knowledge of human customs, human laws. You will be marked as strange as other, and humans fear what is other. I'll learn. The resolve in his voice surprised even him. Just as I learned from you. I'll watch, I'll listen, I'll adapt. And if they hurt you, if they cage you, or kill you for the crime of being different, then you'll have been right. He met her gaze steadily. But I have to discover that, for myself. For a long moment, they stood in silent opposition, the human youth and the ancient dragoness, each unmovable in their conviction. Then, with a grace that belayed her sighs, Eris shifted to one side, clearing the passage. Go, then, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Find your answers among your kind. But remember what I taught you about watching, about listening, about understanding before acting. It may save your life among those who have forgotten how to do any of those things. I will. Nerith hesitated, then added, Thank you for saving me. For raising me, even if your reasons were complicated. Eris made a sound low in her throat, neither acknowledgement nor dismissal. The descent from the northern face is easier, she said instead. The path winds through the pine forest, sheltered from the worst weather. There's a human trade road, half a day's journey beyond, leading to their larger settlements. The practical advice, coming after her emotional opposition, was so typically Eris that Nerith felt a tightness in his chest. This was how she had always shown care, not with words of affection, but with knowledge that might protect him. Will you... He began, then hesitated. Will you be here? If I come back? For the first time since he had known her, Eris seemed uncertain. I don't know, she admitted finally. This mountain holds memories now. Some I might wish to leave behind. The implication was clear. His departure might be the final severance of whatever bond had formed between them over 17 years. I understand, he said, though the words felt hollow in his mouth. With no further farewell, he slipped past her and into the narrow passage, leaving behind the Chamber of Revelations, the Tablet of Truth, and the only parent he had ever known. Behind him in the moonlit chamber, Eris remained motionless, her golden eyes fixed on the space where he had stood. Only when his footsteps had faded completely did she approach the obsidian tablet. With one talon, she traced the name of the eighth, the stolen one. The name that, in the old tongue, translated roughly to Echo of Potential, not so different in its essence from Echo of Flame. A low, keening sound escaped her, a draconic expression of fear, of loss, of grief, of acceptance. Then, with deliberate movements, she gathered the tablet in her foreclaw and carried it deeper into the mountain, to a chamber where water dripped from ancient stalactites into a pool so clear it seemed like liquid crystal. There, she placed the tablet on a ledge above the water, where the occasional droplet would strike its surface, gradually wearing away the inscriptions over centuries to come. A slow erasure, as all memories must eventually fade. "Farewell, Nerith," she whispered in the old tongue. "May you find what you seek among the Ashwalkers. May you prove me wrong about your kind. And may you never need to call upon what I have taught you." With that, she turned and made her way back to the main chamber of the cave, to the empty space that had once held a human child's sleeping form, to the silence that would now be her only companion. And far below the mountain, following the northern path through pine forests, silvered by moonlight, Nerith walked alone toward a world he had only glimpsed from afar, a world that had birthed him, then orphaned him, and now beckoned him with promises of answers he could find nowhere else. Each step took him farther from all he had known. Each step brought him closer to all he had yet to discover. Each step was both ending and beginning, both lost and possibility. Echo of flame, echo of grief, echo of questions without answers. Human, walking towards humans, carrying within him the knowledge of dragons. The kingdom of Eldan sprawled across the fertile plains east of the Stormbreak Mountains. It took Nerith 11 days to reach the outskirts of human civilization. At a roadside inn, he was met with mockery for his strange appearance and formal speech. In the capital city, he found work unloading cargo at the river docks, where his strength earned grudging respect. Gradually, he learned the rhythms of human interaction, and he learned about dragons, how they were feared, hated, and hunted. Most disturbing were the trophies. In the great square, mounted on iron spikes, were the skulls of 3 dragons. In the Royal Museum, entire skins were displayed like tapestries. And everywhere, the prophecy was whispered. A clutch of 8s will birth an empire of scale and flame. The 8th egg carries the doom of mankind. Nerith had been in the city for nearly 2 months when the proclamation came. A young dragon had been captured and would be presented to King Aldrich. On the appointed day, Nerith joined the crowds lining the main thoroughfare. The procession appeared at midday, royal guards followed by a massive iron cage, mounted on a wheeled platform. Inside lay a dragon the color of tarnished silver, young, and bound with heavy chains. Something twisted in Nerith's chest. Not quite recognition, but a profound sense of wrongness. This was no mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling being. The crowd showed no such ambivalence. They jeered and shouted insults as the cage rolled past. A stone flew from somewhere, striking the cage with a metallic clang. Before he could think better of it, Nerith pushed forward. "Stop!" he shouted. "This is wrong!" Guards turned toward him, hands moving to sword hilts. "Stand back, citizen. This is royal business." "It's cruelty!" Nerith insisted. "That creature has done nothing to deserve such treatment." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone hissed, "Dragon lover." "Are you defending the beast?" a guard demanded, his spear inches from Nerith's heart. "I'm questioning the honor in tormenting a captive. Even enemies deserve dignity in defeat." "Dignity? It's a dragon. It would burn you to ash without a second thought. Have you asked it? Have you tried to communicate with it, to understand why it came so close to human lands?" "Sounds like treason to me," the guard growled, sympathizing with the enemy. A royal captain appeared. "You're under arrest for disrupting a royal procession and expressing sympathies to counter the crown's interest." "For asking questions?" Nerith didn't resist, but continued speaking loudly. "Is that what humans do? Silence those who question? Cage those who are different? Cage him with the beast!" Someone shouted from the crowd, a chant quickly forming. The captain smiled unpleasantly. "The people have spoken. Take him to the holding cells beneath the arena." As they dragged him away, Nereth caught the eye of the captive dragon. In that brief moment of connection, he saw not a monster, but a frightened, defiant intelligence. Hours later, guards took Nereth to the vast, empty arena where King Aldrich sat on an elevated platform. Behind him stood courtiers and advisors. Chained to an iron ring in the center was the silver dragon. "So," King Aldrich's voice carried effortlessly, "this is the man who dared defend a dragon in my streets." "I defended reason and honor, Your Majesty. Nothing more." "What do you know of honor, stranger? You're not from Eldan. Your speech betrays you." "I was raised in the mountains," Nereth answered truthfully. "By whom?" "I was raised to respect strength that protects, not strength that dominates." The king's eyes narrowed. "Where does a mountain dweller learn such ideas? And how does he come to speak so passionately in defense of dragons?" "I was taught by one who understood the ways of dragonkind," Nereth said carefully. "A dragon sympathizer, then. Perhaps even a collaborator." He gestured to the chained dragon. "Tell me, can you speak with it? Can you understand its bestial thoughts?" Nereth glanced at the silver dragon, whose eyes were fixed on him with unmistakable intelligence. "I know some words in the old tongue," he admitted. The king's interest sharpened. "The language of dragons? Speak to it, then. Ask why it ventured so close to our northern settlements." Nereth turned toward the dragon. "Verlin tak noch?" he asked, the words emerging with surprising fluency. "Why did you come here?" The dragon's head snapped up, eyes widening in shock. Then, hesitantly, it responded. "Calix nuvarek in sundry." "I was seeking my mother." Nereth translated for the king, who leaned forward with newfound interest. "Ask it where the others of its kind are hiding," Aldrich commanded. Instead, Nereth asked, "Eth sundry veorasan?" "Your mother, where is she?"
Nach the carriage so ehrlich."
"Gone. Humans took her life." The dragon's gaze intensified, studying Nereth.
Sarah von Wach? Sarah Callan Wach?
"How do you speak the flame tongue? How do you know the sacred words?" "What is it saying?" the king demanded. "Translate, or join it in chains." "It says its mother was killed by humans," Nereth replied. "It came seeking her, not to attack your settlements."
"Lies,"
hissed a gray-robed advisor.
"It seeks to deceive through this translator."
The king's expression hardened. "Tomorrow, the beast will kneel before me in front of all Eldan, acknowledging human supremacy. Then, it will die as an example to its kind." He turned his cold gaze on Nereth. "And you will witness its submission before receiving your own judgment." As guards dragged Nereth back to his cell, he caught one last glimpse of the silver dragon. In its eyes, he saw not hatred, but a profound sorrow that mirrored his own. During the night, Nereth learned the dragon's name was Lysirian, and that her mother had been killed by human hunters. She had ventured near human settlements hoping to understand why her kind was so hated, perhaps even to find some path to peace. The next day, both were led to the arena, now filled with thousands of spectators. King Aldrich sat upon an ornate throne, surrounded by his court. Lysirian was positioned in the center, her chains only allowing limited movement. A soldier approached her with a long, barbed whip. The first lash tore across her silver scales, drawing blood. She flinched but remained standing, her eyes fixed on the king with defiance. "Again!" Aldrich commanded. The whip cracked once more, then again. Still, Lysirian would not kneel. Nereth strained against the guards holding him. "Stop! This proves nothing except your own barbarity!" A guard's fist silenced him momentarily. "Perhaps our dragon lover would like to convince the beast to submit," Aldrich suggested cruelly. "After all, he claims to speak its language." The guards shoved Nereth toward Lysirian. He stumbled until he stood directly before her, blood still trickling from her wounds. "Tell it to kneel," the king ordered, "or share its fate." Nereth looked into Lysirian's eyes, seeing in them a mirror of his own divided existence, caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. In that moment, something shifted within him, a recognition of what he truly was. Not dragon, not merely human, but something new. A bridge, perhaps. A memory surfaced. Eris's teachings about true names in the old tongue, how each name contained a dragon's essence, its most fundamental self. How only a parent or life mate would know such a name. Without fully understanding what drove him, Nereth spoke in the most ancient form of the old tongue.
Verseth Lysirian Sundral Valor,
he intoned, the syllables flowing with unexpected power. Lysirian, child of the lost mother, bearer of silver light. The effect was immediate. Lysirian's pupils dilated until they nearly filled her eyes. A sound escaped her. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. And then, slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself to one knee before Nereth. The crowd erupted in cheers, assuming the dragon had been broken to human will. But Nereth knew better. This was no submission to tyranny. This was recognition.
Salut Kaviva,
she whispered, too softly for any but Nereth to hear. You know the sacred words. Before he could respond, a new sound cut through the arena's clamor. The earth-shaking roar of an elder dragon. The crowd's cheers transformed to screams as shadows swept across the sand, massive winged forms circling overhead. In their midst, larger than the others, a dragon the color of obsidian, her golden eyes blazing with fury and recognition. Eris had come, and she was not alone. Chaos erupted across the arena. Spectators scrambled toward exits. Royal guards formed protective circles around the king, spears and bows raised toward the circling dragons. Eris landed with earth-shaking force mere yards from Nereth. For a heartbeat, silence fell across the arena. Then King Aldrich's voice cut through. "Archers! Take aim!" "Wait!" Nereth shouted, stepping between Eris and the human forces. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed!" "It began in bloodshed," Aldrich replied bitterly. "It will end the same way." "Is that the only path humans can imagine?" Nereth's voice carried across the arena. "Must every conflict end in destruction? Must every difference be resolved with death?" "The beast understands nothing else." "Have you tried? Have you ever attempted to understand them, to speak with them?" The king's eyes narrowed. "They burned our villages. They stole our livestock. They killed our people. And you killed theirs." Nereth turned to face Eris, meeting her golden gaze directly. "Both sides have inflicted wounds too deep to be forgotten. But perhaps they need not be repeated." "You're one of them," the king accused. "You were raised by dragons." "By one dragon," Nereth corrected. "By her. After she destroyed my village and killed everyone I might have called family." Gasps rippled through the human ranks.
Why would it raise a human child?
The gray-robed advisor demanded. "Ask her yourself," Nereth suggested. I'll translate her answer, if you're brave enough to hear it. King Aldrich nodded. Speak to the beast then. Ask why it spared you when it murdered your people. Nerith turned to Eris. They want to know why you took me in, after killing my mother. Eris's eyes widened slightly at his directness, but she responded in the draconic language, her voice resonant and musical. He nodded, then addressed the king. 17 years ago, human kings united to destroy a clutch of dragon eggs. Her clutch, because of a prophecy. They killed her mate and smashed 7 of her eggs. The 8th was taken. He paused. In her grief and rage, she attacked my village. My mother died shielding me from dragonfire. When Eris found me alive among the ashes, something stopped her from finishing what she'd started. Sentiment? From a dragon? Aldrich scoffed. More likely it saw a use for you. Perhaps at first, Nerith conceded. But 17 years is a long time. Long enough for hatred to evolve into something more complex. Behind him, Eris rumbled something in the old tongue. She says she raised me as penance, as a reminder of what blind hatred had cost both of us. And eventually, I was her own. A touching tale, the king said coldly. Yet it changes nothing. Your mother is a murderer by her own admission. As are the kings who destroyed her family, Nerith countered. As are the hunters who killed Lycerian's mother. The cycle of vengeance has continued for generations. Perhaps it's time for someone to break it. Fine words, Aldrich sneered. But words won't resurrect the dead on either side. No, they won't. But they might prevent more deaths. Nerith took a step toward the royal die. Your Majesty, you stand at crossroads. You can order your archers to fire, and perhaps they'll kill one dragon before the others incinerate this arena. Or what? Or you can listen. Truly listen. Nerith gestured to the open sky. They came not to attack, but to rescue one of their own. They could have burned this city in the night, yet they waited until I spoke Lycerian's true name, until they recognized what I represent.
And what is that, precisely?
The question came from the gray-robed advisor. A bridge, Nerith replied simply. Someone who belongs to both worlds, and neither. Someone who understands both the human fear of fire from above and the draconic fear of extinction at human hands. A murmur ran through the crowd. Not agreement, not yet, but a softening of the rigid certainty that had dominated before. You propose what? That we simply trust these beasts? To not rain fire upon us the moment we lower our weapons? I propose a beginning, Nerith said. A conversation. Not between king and enemy, but between two species that have misunderstood each other for centuries. He turned to the assembled crowd. You've been told dragons are mindless beasts. I was raised by one. I can tell you they feel love as deeply as any human. They mourn their dead with rituals that span decades. They create art and music. They pass knowledge through generations in an oral tradition older than any human kingdom. Turning to Eris, he continued in the old tongue. You've taught me that humans are ashwalkers, that they fought, betray, and destroy what they fear. But I've lived among them. They create beauty from nothing. They dance to celebrate life's simplest pleasures. They risk their lives to save strangers. Their love transcends logic. Eris's golden eyes never left his face, something like wonder dawning in their depths. Nerith ascended a central platform. Today, I stand between worlds. I am Nerith, raised by dragonfire, born of human compassion. He removed his tunic, revealing a pattern of scars along his back, deliberate markings in the shape of draconic script that Eris had placed there during his 13th year. I bear the marks of both worlds, the scars of fire in the shape of humanity. I am neither dragon, nor entirely human, but something new, something that could exist only because a dragon chose mercy over vengeance, and a human woman chose sacrifice over survival. Then, he faced Eris once more and spoke a single word. Eris Valanthian! Her true name. The massive dragoness shuddered, as if struck by lightning. Her wings unfurled to their full span. For a moment, it seemed she might attack. Then, to the astonishment of every human present, she lowered her head, folded her wings, and sank to her knees before Nerith. The other dragons followed suit, creating an unprecedented tableau. Dragons kneeling not in submission to a superior force, but in recognition of something beyond ordinary power. In the stunned silence that followed, Nerith turned back to the king. Your Majesty, I ask you now to match their courage. King Aldrich stood frozen, visibly torn between historical hatred and the evidence before him. Finally, he spoke. What exactly do you propose, Nerith of Two Worlds? Release Lysirian. Allow me to establish a place where representatives of both species can meet in peace, where we might begin the slow work of understanding each other. And if we refuse, then the cycle continues, Nerith said simply. More villages will burn. More dragons will fall. Both species will diminish, locked in a conflict. Neither can truly win. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then, with deliberate movements, King Aldrich descended from his dais. Step by careful step, he approached Nerith. My grandfather died by dragonfire, he said quietly. I was raised to hate them, to fear them, to see their extinction as necessary for human survival. How do I know this isn't some elaborate trap? You don't, Nerith admitted, just as they don't know that freeing Lysirian won't lead to her immediate execution once they've departed. Trust must begin somewhere, Your Majesty. Aldrich studied him for a long moment. Whatever he sought, something in what he found seemed to satisfy him. With a sharp nod, he turned to his guards. Release the Silver One. As soldiers hurried to obey, Aldrich addressed Nerith once more. I will give your proposal consideration. A neutral territory where discussions might take place. His expression hardened. But at the first sign of treachery, I will bring the full might of Eldan against your bridge between worlds. Fair enough, Nerith agreed. And any human aggression against peaceful dragons will be met with equal response. Either we both choose a different path, or we both remain trapped in the old one. Lysirian, now freed, moved to join Eris, both dragons maintaining their kneeling posture, despite their liberty to flee. Nerith turned to them and spoke in the old tongue. Will you trust me to create this bridge, to build something that has never existed between our kinds? Eris responded, her voice like distant thunder. You are the eighth, Nerith, the one the prophecy spoke of, not as destroyer of mankind, but as its bridge to our world. Nerith translated for the king, whose expression remained guarded but thoughtful. Tell it, Aldrich said, gesturing to Eris, that we will watch, and wait, and judge by actions, not words. After Nerith relayed this, Eris rose to her full height. Rather than speaking to Nerith, she locked eyes with the king, to the astonishment of every human present, spoke in halting, accented human language. As will we. With that, she spread her wings and launched into the sky, followed by Lysirian and the other dragons. They circled above the arena, then soared toward the mountains. In their wake, they left a city balanced on the knife edge between ancient fear and new possibility. And at the center of it all stood Nerith, child of fire and grief, speaker of two tongues, the living bridge between worlds that had always been destined to collide. 3 years later, Nerith stood on the highest balcony of what was now called Concordia, a settlement that straddled the border between human and draconic territories. Below him, humans and dragons moved through spaces designed for both species. Children ran alongside dragonettes in the central square, their laughter rising like sparks. Scholars from 6 human kingdoms huddled with their elder dragons near the library, comparing observations and arguing about translations. It wasn't peace. Not truly, not yet. There had been setbacks. Villages burned by dragons who rejected the Concord's principles. Dragon eggs smashed by humans who clung to old hatreds. Treaties signed, then broken when fear resurfaced. But it was a beginning. A possibility growing stronger with each passing season. Admiring your handiwork? Alara's voice came from behind him. She was King Aldrich's granddaughter, a scholar who had become the first human ambassador to Concordia. Hardly my handiwork alone, Nerith replied. Every person below has risked something to be here. Eris landed on a nearby platform, returning from a diplomatic mission. The Northern Clutch will send representatives next spring, she announced. They remain skeptical, but curious. Curiosity is enough to begin with, Alara observed. Not always, the dragoness replied, her golden eyes finding Nerith's. Sometimes, wisdom comes from the heart, not the mind. From choosing what we could be over what has been. Below them, a young dragon was demonstrating fire breathing to human children, carefully projecting tiny, controlled flames, while adults monitored the lesson. Nearby, a human healer consulted with a dragon about medicinal herbs. There will be more challenges, Eris observed. More losses. More fear to overcome. Yes, Nerith agreed. The prophecy never promised ease. Only possibility. What? Prophecy? Alara asked. A clutch of 8 will birth an empire of scale and flame, he recited. The 8th egg carries the doom of mankind. But you weren't the 8th egg. You were human. Was I? Or was I what the 8th egg became after it was taken? A human child raised by dragonkind, rather than a dragon raised by humans. And this, empire of scale and flame? Alara gestured to Concordia. Is this what it foretold? Nerith looked out over the settlement, humans and dragons coexisting, not perfectly, but with persistent hope. Not an empire as kings understood the term, he said softly, but perhaps a different kind of lasting change. Not domination, but conversation. Not conquest, but connection. The doom of mankind, Eris added, might have simply meant the end of humanity's isolation, the end of its separation from the wider community of thinking beings. Below them, a dragon's roar mingled with human laughter, the sounds harmonizing in ways no one would have thought possible 4 years earlier. Nerith felt the weight of the names he carried. Nerith, echo of flame, given by Eris. And Alden, his birth name, recently discovered in the records of Eldrath Village. 2 names, 2 heritages, Two paths that had somehow converged in this moment, this place, this possibility. He thought of his human mother, whose final act of love had literally shaped history. He thought of Eris, whose choice to break a cycle of vengeance had created space for something new to grow. And he thought of the future spreading before them, unwritten, full of challenge and promise in equaling measure. Not an ending, but a beginning. A story still being told, in two tongues, under one sky. A flame still burning, between worlds that were slowly, painstakingly, becoming one.